Hi, I'm Sean from Sean's Strange DC120 and welcome to the third episode of the oo9 layout build. As you see, I've got a train running, so I've got the wiring done. So in this video I'm going to show you how I wired this layout up. So let's get cracking. I've turned the layout upside down and now it's time to wire up all the dropper cables that I soldered to the underside of the tracks earlier. Now all these dropper cables have got to be wired together to this controller to power the track. How we're going to do this is we're going to use the two terminal connectors that I've screwed to the bottom of the baseboard. One terminal connector is going to have all the positive feeds and the other terminal is going to have the negative feeds. The terminals are screw terminals, so it's just a simple matter of screwing the positive wires to the positive terminals and the negative wires to the negative terminals. I'll be doing this with all of the dropper cables, and I can then wire the controller to this so I can then power the main track of the layout. The sidings on the layout will not have droppers because they will be isolated from the main circuit, and the way the sidings will get the power is when the points are changed to transfer the power. So I'm just going to screw these wires onto the terminals and then we can look at wiring up the controller. Now the dropper wires are all wired into the terminal blocks, we now need to secure the wires to the baseboard so they don't hang down and they're not loose. To do this I'm going to be using these cable clamps just to clamp the wire to the baseboard. They're self-adhesive and easy to use. I just stick the clamp to the baseboard and then I'd hook up the wire and it keeps the wire secure to the baseboard. The two wires I'm clamping up now are for the controller. The wires are screwed onto the terminals and they'll have a chocolate block connector on the end. Basically there'll be one wire going towards the front of the layout and another two wires going to the back of the layout with another chocolate block connector. By doing this I can choose to have the controller at the front of the layout or at the back of the layout, depending where the layout is going to be situated. For example, when the layout is at home, the controller will be at the front of the layout where I'll use the chocolate block and the cable at the front. If I take the model railway to a show, then I'll be at the back of the layout where I'll be using the wire and the chocolate block connector at the back. So at the moment I'm just clamping these wires down so they're all secure in the place where they should be. Now all the wires are wired up to the connectors, I've now got to add these clear covers to the top that come in really handy. They're numbered all the way along, so if you wanted to label where each wire is going, you could do a list of where the wires are going and corresponding with numbers on the terminals, which always comes in handy. Also with these covers on top of the terminals there's no risk of any short circuiting. The power to each of the terminals is transferred using the two bridging pieces at the back of the terminals. There's a bridging piece for the positive side and there's a bridging piece for the negative side. And again, there's no risk of short circuiting because they're both insulated. Now that's all the track power sorted, we now got to look at wiring up the point motors for the layout. Now the track wiring is complete, the next focus is to wire up the point motors. So let's look at how we do this now. I've drawn this diagram of the point motor and a 3-pole toggle switch to help explain how I'm going to wire the point motor up. The point motors we're using are PM1s because there's a micro switch in between the two solenoids that will change the polarity of the frog. The first wires we're going to look at is the wires going to and from the CDU to the switch and the point motor. As you can see, the positive wire from the CDU is going to the center pole on the toggle switch, and the negative wire is coming from tab C on the point motor going to the CDU. We'll talk about what the CDU is and what the CDU is for later on in the video. The remaining poles on the toggle switch will be wired to tab A and tab B. These wires will allow the solenoids to operate, so when you flick the switch one way, the solenoid on one side will operate, and then when you flick the switch the other way, the solenoid will operate on the other side. But the toggle switch has to stay in middle afterwards. It can only be one flick that way or one flick that way, because you don't want to overload the solenoid. With the wiring for the point motor operation all sorted, we now got to look at the wiring for the changing the polarity of the frog. So I've drawn in a diagram of a point at the bottom, and I'm going to show you how we wire up the micro switch to change the polarity of the frog. As you can see, we've got 3 tabs left, D, E and F, and we're going to be looking at what wires go to them next. The first wire we're going to look at is the frog wire from the point. Now the frog wire will go to tab F on the point motor, and this will allow the change in polarity of power from the micro switch to go to the frog wire and then to the frog on the point, to allow for better running on the points. The next wires we're looking at is the plus and minus wires from the wiring bus for the track, and these wires will be soldered to tab D and E. So the positive wire will be soldered to tab D and the negative wire will be soldered to tab E. If the train stalls on the point, then it could possibly be that the 2 wires are the wrong way round. So that being the case, all you would need to do is just swap the wires the other way round, and then everything should be fine. Now that we know where all the wires go on the point motor and the switch, it's now time to put it into practice. I'm just going to start off by adding a little bit of solder to each tab on the point motor. Take your time at this stage, because you don't want to end up having bits of solder crossing between tabs, because this could cause a short circuit. To wire the point motor to the switch, I'm using this 3-wire cord from Gauge Master. These wires will go straight from the point motor to the point motor switch, but I will be having a chocolate block connector in between the two. I'm using the same process as before with stripping and tinning the wires, and then I'll solder the wires to the point motor, and then after that the wires on the other end will be going into a chocolate block. I'm not 100% sure where the point motor switches will be going yet, so by having a short length of wire going from the point motor to a chocolate block, it means I have that option to work out where the switches are going to be going. Now time to sort out the wiring for the micro switch to the frog on the point. For this I'm going to use the wire that I've been using for the wiring bus and this green wire from Gauge Master for the frog. The black and red wire I'm using to bring power to the point motor from the track wiring bus, and the green wire I'm using to transfer the power from the point motor micro switch to the frog on the point. Again, it's the same process as before, tinning the wire and attaching it, soldering it to the point motor and attaching the other end to a chocolate block. This is what the point motor now looks like with all the wires soldered on. These are the wires for the switch and the micro switch for the frog. You've got tab A, which will be going to the switch, and tab B that will be going to the other side of the switch. You've got C, which is the common return to the switch, and then you've got D and E for the power supply to the micro switch, and this green wire that will be going to the frog on the point. So that's basically all the track wiring and the point wiring underneath the board all done. The only thing I need to do now is solder a green frog wire from the frog to the point, so I can then attach to the chocolate block leading to the point motor. After that, all the point motors should be able to change the polarity of the frog. This wiring does look a bit complicated, but it's actually quite simple. As long as the track feed wires are separate from the point feed wires, you won't get mixed up. The second pair of connector blocks feeds the power to the point motor micro switch, and the power is coming from the track bus from the first pair of power connectors. It's now time to turn the layout over and sort out the frog wires on the points. Right, so now back to the top side of the layout. I did decide to solder the frog wires off camera. It was getting a little bit tricky, but basically what I've done is where the frog is, I put a bit of solder in between the two, and then soldered the frog wire into the frog. So now both of these bits of rail, when point motor changes, it will change the polarity of these two bits of track, so there won't be a short circuit. And I've done this all the way along there and there, and all the points along there at the back. Now, one thing I have got to do before I can say this is finished is just lightly sand these solders down, because when I tested the train along it, you know, it did kind of rock and bounce a bit, so these need to be sanded down so they're flush. The one thing I will mention, you may notice there's a point motor here. Now this point motor, there's nothing wrong with it, but where that point motor was over here on this one, and if I put the point motor in place, there wasn't any good proper way to attach it, so I was attaching it with just one screw. I thought one screw and a bit of glue would be enough, but it just wasn't working right, so I've decided to remove that point and just do it by hand. So then the next question is how do I then change the polarity of the frog? Well, what I've done there is I used a thing called a frog juicer, or an auto frog by Gauge Master, which basically means that this wire is attached to the frog juicer, and the frog juicer has two wires coming from the point bus, the point motor power bus for the micro switch, and basically when the point changes, the auto frog detects that there's a change in polarity, and it will change the polarity automatically. So that's what I'm using there now. So in regards to this point motor, I didn't have enough point motors for the whole layout, so I possibly might end up putting that point motor there at a later date. So there's my cat meowing. Right, so before I end the video, we'll just have a quick look at a CDU. Now this is what you call a CDU, which means it's a capacity discharge unit. Now what this does is, when it's wired up, it will store power in these capacitors. Right, so you've got a negative and positive feed going in to the capacitor. Now this cannot run off the track feed, it has to run off a auxiliary feed, so a constant power supply to the CDU. And the other side of the CDU will go to the switches to switch the points. Now what will happen is, when the switch is thrown and the point is thrown, the power that is stored in the capacitors will come out of the capacitors through the switch and then to solenoid on the point motor, which will then, don't know if you see it on camera, it will make that plunger move from side to side. Now the reason why you had to have a toggle switch where it stays in the centre, so one flick forward, one flick back, is because if the plunger stays, well, if the solenoid stays on, the solenoid will overheat and eventually will break. So that's why you need a switch where it just flicks one side, centre, flicks the other side, then centre. And going back to the CDU, for the solenoid to work, it needs a high power sharp burst of power, which is what the CDU supplies. The CDU basically supplies a sharp burst of power to the solenoid to make the solenoid work. So that's basically what that is. That's what the CDU does. Well, we're going to leave the video there, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit of a long one with the wiring, but the next video I want to start working on all the scenics. So the first bit I'll probably start off with is this bit here, where it'd be a tunnel, waterfall, the rocks and the mountains and stuff. So that'll be all in the next episode, or as much as I can do in the next episode. Seeing it's kind of, it takes a while to do the scenics. But yeah, we're gonna call that a video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and if you like the video, if you could hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, if you could subscribe, it'll really help the channel. So thank you for watching. You all take care, and bye bye.